Please welcome Senator Ted Cruz.
You know, back in the fall, I spoke at the Republican convention down in Tampa. And I talked about the national debt. I talked about our two little girls, Caroline and Catherine. And when I got back to the hotel room, it was about 1:30 in the morning, and I pulled out my iPhone and began looking at Twitter. And it so happens that Paula Poundstone, the comedian, was watching the convention that night. I guess she didn't have anything better to do. And she sent a tweet. She said, Ted Cruz just said that when his daughter was born, the national debt was $10 trillion. Now it's $16 trillion. What the heck did she do? Which, I got to tell you, Heidi and I laughed so hard we almost fell out of bed. But our daughter Caroline is 5 years old. Think about that. In her short life, our national debt has grown over 60%. It's now nearly $17 trillion. And here's a very simple question. Who the heck do you think is going to pay for all that? Young people are being sold down the river by the Obama economic agenda. And I got to tell you, I think it is fundamentally immoral. You know, my parents didn't give my generation crushing debt. Their parents didn't give their generation crushing debt. Y'all are the first generation in history to be handed massive debt larger than the size of our entire economy, to be told, congratulations, you're going to be working the rest of your lives, not to meet the challenges that will arise in your lives, but to pay off the debt that your parents and grandparents racked up. Now, given all of that, it is astonishing that Barack Obama won 70% of the young people. But there's a reason. Look, young people inevitably, election after election, respond to inspiration. They respond to leadership. I think we still have the constitutional foundations, but I think they are sorely threatened. And I think this administration has been unique in its onslaught on the Constitution. This is the most lawless administration I think that has ever occupied the White House. And it seems one at a time they are systematically undermining the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. Whether the First Amendment, our rights of religious liberty, our rights of speech, whether the Second Amendment, our right to keep and bear arms, whether the Fourth Amendment, our right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. This is an administration that systematically has been undermining constitutional rights and has been expanding power. But at the same time, I got to tell you, I am optimistic. As dire as things are, we've got out of control spending, out of control taxes, out of control regulation, we have crushing debt, we have an exploding leviathan of a federal government. So why am I optimistic? We have a republic if you can keep it. And the real answer in terms of are we going to preserve our Constitution, are we going to preserve our free market system, is going to come down to the men and women in this room. If we effectively stand up and defend those principles, they won't defend themselves. It's just like young people. You know, why did young people not understand the blessings of liberty? Well, no one told them. Look, most young people, you're not going to learn about free market principles of the Constitution from the schools. You're not going to learn from the universities. You're not going to learn from mainstream media. You're certainly not going to learn it from Hollywood. If we don't teach it, who will? And so it comes down to each of us. And I am optimistic the more we get engaged to take our country back, I think the more success we'll have. If you look at the last 40 years at presidential races, there's a very simple pattern. When Republicans run a candidate who runs as a strong conservative, we win. When we run a candidate who runs as an establishment moderate, we lose. Let's go back to 1968. 1968 and 1972, Richard Nixon ran as a strong conservative. He didn't govern as one, but he ran as one. He won 72 overwhelmingly. In 1976, Gerald Ford ran as a moderate and lost. 1980, Reagan led a revolution, retook this country running as a strong conservative. 1984, Reagan ran as a strong conservative. And actually, the case that I think proves this thesis most effectively. In 1988, George Bush 41 ran as a strong conservative, as effectively the third term of Reagan, and he won. Fast forward to 92, and he ran as a moderate candidate who lost. 96, Bob Dole ran and lost. 2000, 2004, Bush ran as a strong conservative and won. And then 2008, John McCain. 2012, Mitt Romney. Now, that's 40 years. And what do the political geniuses in Washington say? We need to run more liberal candidates. Einstein famously said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Our country was founded on the proposition that rights don't come from kings and queens. They don't come from presidents. They come from God. And the purpose of government is to secure these rights, is to protect them, and the purpose of our Constitution is to limit government to ensure those rights are protected. I think the Republican Party is and should be unequivocally the party of life. Margaret Thatcher, one of my all-time heroes, also famously said, the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. And we're seeing that come home to roost. There comes a point where you have politicians who have spent so much money, the debt hole is dug so deep that there's no pretty way out. And one way or another, we're going to stop the out-of-control spending. We're either going to do it voluntarily now by exercising prudence and reason to pull back from the brink, or we're going to do it involuntarily. I got to tell you, the biggest lie in all of politics is that Republicans are the party of the rich. It's complete and utter nonsense. The people who have been hurt the most by the Obama economy have been the most vulnerable. They have been young people, Hispanics, African Americans, single moms. When you hammer small businesses with $1.7 trillion in new taxes, with massive new regulations, Obamacare alone is over 20,000 pages in regulations. It's more than 7 feet tall. The CEOs do fine. In the last 5 years, if 5 years ago you were flying a private jet, you're still flying a private jet. The wealthy have done fine under President Obama. The people who have been hammered are those struggling to climb the economic ladder, because what happens when you're hammering the small businesses is who do they lay off? Who do they not hire? And it's why under President Obama we've seen Hispanic unemployment climb to nearly 10%. African American unemployment, 14%. Young people, age 16 to 19, over 25% unemployment. That's who gets hammered the most. And I think as Republicans, we are and should be not the party of the rich, but the party of the young, aspirational Americans seeking a better life, the party of the entrepreneur, the party of the person working to climb the economic ladder. That's who we are, and that's who we need to champion. There's some Republicans who think that social media, that they just need to, hire a couple of techies and, hey, get me that Tweety thing. Look, social media is a tool. It can amplify a message, but you got to have a message. And that's something Republicans have utterly failed to do so over and over and over again. So you've got to start with a message that resonates, that has force, and then social media can amplify that. I think you can also use tools that empower people. One of the best bits of advice that my wife Heidi gave me years ago before giving a speech, I was getting ready to walk out, and she reminded me, she said, Ted, It's not about you. It's about them. It's one of the simplest and best pieces of advice. Nobody cares about some politician pontificating. People care about their own lives, their own aspirations, their hopes, their passions, their future. So social media is powerful when people are energized to be engaged. Let me give you two specific examples. One, during the campaign for Senate in Texas. Now, when I started as a candidate for the Senate back in January of 2011, nobody on earth thought we had a prayer. I was literally at 2% in the polls. The margin of error was 3%. And I'm actually not making that up. Those were our real poll numbers. I mean, we were thrilled to be at 2%. We went through a $50 million primary. It's the most expensive primary in the entire country. And we were outspent 3-1. There was $35 million in nasty attack ads run against me. Midway through, my wife is watching all the ads, and she turns to me and says, "Goodness gracious, I didn't realize you were such a rotten guy." And what we saw was an army of grassroots activists across Texas, thousands and thousands upon thousands of people coming together, getting engaged, getting involved, getting online, getting on Facebook, getting on Twitter, and communicating the message. And the specific example I'll point to you is in New York just a couple of weeks ago. I was giving a talk to the New York Republican Party, and a bunch of liberal groups decided to protest. And they decided to start a Twitter bomb. At 5:30 p.m. during my speech, they were all going to tweet, "You Cruz, you lose." And conservatives all over the country decided to counteract that and do a counter Twitter bomb with the hashtag Cruz to victory. They did it at the exact same time. By 9 o'clock that Wednesday night, Cruz to victory was trending #1 in the United States, #2 worldwide. And the liberal group didn't even make the lists. Now, the beauty of that was it was entirely organic. We didn't generate that. We didn't do that. That came from the people. And the way to use social media is to empower people. This is your fight. We're fighting to take the country back. And that's where y'all make a difference on social media. And I got to say, it is just an honor to be here with you and to be fighting side by side, because together, we're fighting to take the country back. Thank you.